Hey, everybody. Welcome to another session of the fabulous HR Heretics. We are here today with another Pendo friend, Tricia Price, Pendo's Chief Product Officer. I'm so excited to have her here. I worked with her for 3 years, Pendo. And Tricia, today, clearly I've dusted off my pink sweater. This is rare, but it's here. I mean, it's like a crew neck with the whole thing's, It
has a little bit of like Elizabeth Holmes vibes.
It does.
Like with the turtleneck thing.
Yeah. For those of you who...
Instead of black turtleneck, she's going pink turtleneck.
For those of you who only listen and don't watch, today might be a good time to check out the YouTube. All I need is a brooch and we're good to go. But Tricia's awesome. We've been working together for years. Excited to have her on. Previous to Pendo, she was at Encino as their product officer, innovation officer for about 6 years. She sits on boards. Before that, she was in sales and go-to-market and products at Primatics Financial. She is from Virginia, resides in North Carolina, and we are excited to get into it with you today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So just to jump in, we like to, get into the meat here and the zingers right away. And I got to dig into the dynamics of being a chief products officer working for a founder CEO that's a product guru. I mean, that is like me starting my own company and then hiring a people officer. It's a dynamic, it's a vibe, and it's not easy. And Todd's been on the show, as you know, very intense, lots of strong opinions. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you deal with that and how you dealt with that, especially onboarding through today, 3 years later. You're still here.
Still here. It is a special dynamic, and you missed one more piece of the puzzle, like founder, CEO, product guru, product person, and Pendo sells to product people as our buyer. So there's like even sort of a third dynamic. Also a fourth dynamic, which is one of the other founders is on our product leadership team as well. So there is definitely a lot there. And I think if you can figure out how to build trust, how to build relationships, and how to utilize founders the right way, it can be an incredibly special tool or gift. At the same time, you have to figure out how to set boundaries and how to be a tough cookie in certain situations to not get run over. So it's been good and bad for me.
I've seen this relationship actually work out terribly in the past. And it's actually at that company, I still don't think it's working out great. But like, one of the examples was the founder was like showing up to product reviews and, still pinging engineers on a daily basis and still very much in the minutia, which is how they got to be so good usually. How did you solve that problem?
Well, in the very beginning, we did have some ground rules. I asked for some space for a period of time where Todd would not interact with anyone other than one level below me. And even that, we would talk about what those meetings were going to be. They wouldn't be secret. They wouldn't be in private or sort of behind my back. They would be something we both talked about and aligned on what the purpose was in discussions. But I did ask for him not to come to any product reviews or get in the details with individual contributors. I'm going to say 3 or 4 months that I asked for. I knew that couldn't be too long, Nolan, because that's not fair to Todd either to just give me blank trust and say, go mess everything up, right? But I also needed a little time to get my arms around everything. And if he was in there directing, it's like as soon as you try to make progress and get your hands around things, they change. And so we did have that mutual understanding. He actually still does not come to my product reviews unless we ask him to, and sometimes we do. But we do have a quarterly sort of more QBR style type meeting where he can engage at a little bit higher of an altitude. And then we also, if we're building a brand new product, and Todd is so good when you're thinking about building a brand new product and the user experience, we will absolutely have brainstorm sessions with Todd and pick his brain and use his magic to help drive the experience of the product.
Yeah, you got to like channel like the genius and use that in the selective right cases versus, like always like the involvement, because otherwise it just feels like dad is there all the time. And then it kind of handicaps you and stops you from being able to do a good job.
It does, Nolan. And I find that specifically to Todd, utilizing him in a brainstorm session is just magical. And the way he can operate with me, or even if I'm not there with the individual contributors, even is really great. That's wildly different than putting him in the middle of a product review where you're more in a position of leadership and decision making. And that needs to be my space.
Yep.
And founders love to be involved. I mean, it is impossible to like give them the hand and say, stay out, because they will, you know what I mean? They're like, they'll find their way in like a rodent.
Todd said it on the show. Like Todd, when we were talking about, execs that are going to do well versus not, like one of his early red flags is when they just go off on an island, come do a thing, and he's not brought along. That's actually like one of his big red flags.
Yes, it is.
Well, that's a really good point, Nolan, because we talked about meetings and him coming to product reviews and brainstorms. But even when he wasn't coming to product reviews, I wasn't out there making decisions on a daily basis and not talking to him about it. He was advising, he was influencing, we were collaborating on those decisions. It's just I needed a little space in some of those meetings to be the leader. But that doesn't mean like I wasn't appreciating or asking his opinion. I mean, he's started the company, knows every in and out about it. Why wouldn't I want that guidance?
I just want to double click really quick, because if I'm in the audience, I might be saying, that's really wonderful that you were able to set ground rules with your very passionate founder CEO and he agreed to leave you alone. That is not normal or the norm. And like, how did you do that in a way where he agreed? And did he push back at all? And what advice do you have for others to ask for that? Because I don't think a lot of people ask for that. And if they do, they might get met with the bird.
I think a few things. One, it was something we aligned on before I started.
But it wasn't in the offer letter because I wrote that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
In the paragraph 2B, I think the other piece of the puzzle, and we can talk about this in a bit, is Todd and Pendo and I spent a lot of time getting to know each other before I started. It was at least a 9-month, maybe a year-long sort of dating scenario before I came to Pendo. And so there was a trust built already. We had a lot of common people we knew. And so I do think I came in from a place of trust. I do think I came in with a clear expectation that I needed room to operate, but I would do so collaboratively. And yeah, we did have disagreements for sure. And we still do. And I think that might be the most magical part of how it's worked and our relationship is I will get mad and he will know that. And he'll on his walk home from work, give me a call and say like, hey, how would you like for me to show up for that meeting differently? Or I'll call him and say, really wish you could have handled that a different way with me next time. And I think we don't let that frustration build up the way it can sometimes at work. And I think that's another big piece of how we've sustained.
Yeah. There is a piece that like, he's kind of a normal human. Like I've experienced like Todd a couple of times. I'm like, this guy's kind of dope. So you can't like think about him as like how most founders operate, especially with like the festering thing. I feel like most founders let a lot of things fester and then it like boils over. But the thing that you said, which I think is very contrarian, is this like 9-month to 1 year recruiting process. I remember being at Google and talking a lot about the executive candidate experience, and they had to meet like 10 people and thinking at the time like, well, yeah, like, of course, like this shouldn't be like an expedited process. Like this is like one of the most important hires like we're ever making. And oh, by the way, for them, like they want to know where the bodies are buried and they want to know what they're walking into and how they could possibly be successful. And, we just had Andy Price on the show who was saying that you need to soak with the company. That's how recruiters get it. I actually think like candidates need to do that too. So can you elaborate more on what that process was like?
Sure. First I do want to say absolutely for my sake too, not just theirs. Like it's like getting married. It is, right? I mean, it is a little bit easier to leave a tech company than it is your spouse, but like it is a complicated process. And I think you do need to spend a lot of time into it. For me, my experience, Kelly was our chief people officer, and we built an incredible relationship through that process, as I did with Todd, as I did with Eric Trone, our founder CTO as well. But for me, what happened was there was an exec who had been at Salesforce. My last company, Encino, was built on top of the App Exchange in partnership with Salesforce. And so I was very close with several of the senior executives, especially on the product side at Salesforce. And I think Kelly or Pendo had reached out to my friend, Mike McCucci. And Mike said the timing wasn't right for him or whatever, but he and Todd knew each other. And he said, I don't know if you know this, but there's a really great chief product officer in North Carolina, literally in your backyard. You should get to know Trisha. And I had already been at Encino for almost 6 years, 5+ years at the time. And so via Mike, Kelly, Todd, and I got connected. And Todd, reached out and I said, hey, I might be interested one day in Pendo, but I'm 9 months to a year away from making a move. I had just expressed to Encino that, it might be time for me to move on in a year, 6 months, and time for me to start thinking about an us succession planning, which we were starting the process of. And so Todd said, great, fine, let's meet anyway. Funny enough, I went to dinner with my husband and almost forgot I had the meeting with Todd on the calendar. This is how much I wasn't looking. And I was like, oh my God, I got to get home. So, glass of wine and a first discussion later, because I had forgotten about it, we really enjoyed each other. And then he said, meet Kelly. And then, I said the same thing. I love this. This is so cool, especially the fact that I'm in North Carolina. It's in North Carolina. I love that it's product for product and a more technical product, which I was very excited about. But I need time, right? We had just gone public from Encino. You've got to make sure you do all the right things from a transition perspective. And I was very thoughtful of that. So then Todd said, okay, well, next time I come to my beach house, because he has a beach house somewhat near where I live, let's get together. So then we had coffee, and it was just he's like, okay, we'll just meet a couple more people. And I did. And I kept saying the same thing. And it's funny. It was 9 months to the day when I started at Pendo from that first discussion. And he had said, I cannot wait 9 months, but we did. And it was great because we did have that time to all get to know each other.
That's so good. It feels like a very organic process. I've actually found it's really hard to assess product leaders for their talent. I still, to this day, I struggle with this of what does a good product leader look like and how do you go about assessing it? And so what's your take on
it? Look, can I ask you before, Tricia, why have you had issues assessing product leaders, specifically Nolan? What is it? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I find that ultimately the success of a product leader is how good is the product and how good is the business model. And so a lot of times it's, they just joined a company that had a great product and a great business model. And so what the hell did they actually do here? Versus building something from scratch, because I'm in more 0 to 1 mode. You guys are in 1 to N mode. And so I don't even know how to think about it. So can you educate me on how you think about that?
Well, I love that clarification because I do think it is different what's a great product leader from 0 to 1 and 1 to N. And I am, Nolan, more of a scaler. I am more of a product leader that's 1 to N than I am 0 to 1. For me, at the highest level, my job is to hire great people. My job is to set a high bar, cheer really loud when we reach the bar, pick us up when we don't, brush us off, keep moving. Making that entails having the right talent, having the right vision, playing with new technology like AI, etc. And it requires making hard prioritization decisions, knowing what to say no to. Also, really, really understanding the company strategy and tying the company strategy to the product decisions. You can't just build features. Good product leaders drive business outcomes, and we understand what the business outcomes are. I'm a business person first. And product execution is how we achieve the outcome. And so for me, that is, especially if you're talking about 1 to N, what is a great product leader?
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Real talk, most talent leaders haven't yet cracked how to leverage AI for meaningful impact on their hiring processes and business goals. But the leaders who are effectively using AI to transform their recruiting team's efficiency and quality use MetaView. MetaView is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. That means your people can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate in every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Join forward-thinking talent leaders at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out MetaView. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of MetaView's product experts, or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes. Yeah, and especially at a company like Pendo, where the ICP is product leaders and you have 3-4 founders in there at some point having all opinions, and everyone has an opinion on the product because that's the passion of the company and the, who you sell to. How do you deal with that? How do you manage the strategic part of it versus being in the weeds and all the little things you have to do? Any advice or things you put in place to seem open, or be open and take in ideas, but also stay sane and, have a boundary?
Well, first of all, a good product leader spends a lot of time with customers and prospects. You have to. And that's 50% evangelizing, because especially if you're in B2B, let me be clear, if you're in B2B, your customers are putting their neck on the line and their careers on the line buying your product, and they have to build from a place of trust. And a place of trust can come because they tried out your product, because they've used it before, because their best friend uses it. But it can also come from building a relationship with people and knowing that you're going to be a company, a team, a person who's going to be there and respond when things go wrong, whether that's a bug or a performance problem or a feature missing. And so that building relationship, building trust, evangelizing is an important part of my job. But equally, it is to build the relationships, to ask people, what are their biggest challenges? What are the outcomes they're trying to achieve? What are the challenges? And then aligning our investment strategy and roadmap to what those challenges are. And so that is, for me, a key piece of the puzzle, is that time with one-on-one with customers and prospects, for sure.
Yeah.
How do you think about the tension between like sales and product? I've been a part of companies that, sales is always like, well, if we just had this one feature, right, Trisha? Like, come on, what's taking so long for you guys to build this thing? And then it's literally like a never ending feature list that they will always come up with.
We need more to sell.
Yeah, exactly. How do you think about like that tension, and specifically the input from go-to-market?
I think, especially at Pendo, I'm really fortunate to have good relationships with the go-to-market team. Also, they sell to products, so they need us and they depend on us because we have very strong relationships. Like, it's more than just product to your normal ICP or your buyer. It's product to product, spending that relationship. And so they probably need us really badly. So that's part of why the relationship, like pissing us off, is probably not the best option out there. But because we're the ones speaking at all the product conferences, right? All those things. So that doesn't happen as much. Also, I think because Todd is such a product person, he really does not let that happen. And the product is his baby, and he built, the first versions of it for sure. So there's probably a little bit of buffer or something there because of Todd's love of our product and belief in our product. But I also think we execute. I mean, of course, I'm biased to my team, but our last 2 pandemoniums, our user conference, if you came to them, I mean, there's so much innovation. Customers tell me like they can barely keep up. Our customer success team will tell me they can barely keep up. We are fighting the sales enablement calendar to get all of the product into sales enablement and train. So it'd be pretty tough for sales, I think, to tell us that we're sort of the slowdown. There are times where competitors will go do an acquisition, or competitors will come out with something that feels in that moment for that one particular feature like a move, and go to market will put pressure on us or ask us, what are we doing? in response to that. But I think that's a fair question. And we as a product team try not to get defensive in that moment, because I think that's a fair question when they ask it.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel pinched or pressured or unreasonably stressed out given all this AI pressure? Like, I feel like everyone's like waking up at 3 a.m. Like, AI, what am I gonna do? Like, how do you like keep that straight in your mind? How does that affect you, if at all?
I would say I feel more pressure for the company to succeed and hit the numbers and do what we need to hit our business outcomes. If I wake up at night, it's that. Or if I wake up at night, it's because of a people issue or a change that I need to make in my organization, not a particular feature or a product thing we need to build. I think we jumped on top of AI pretty early on and have had a good AI strategy and a good steady state of executing against it and releasing product. We could always do more, but I feel pretty good about where we are specific to AI. So if anything keeps me up at night, it's like, are we going to hit the number? Is there more I can do to help us hit the numbers?
Gotcha.
It does feel like there's just like a lot of hype in AI. And I keep saying, I think the hype train is way ahead of where reality is right now. And so one question is, do you agree with that? And then the second question is, the hype train, I think, is actually going to hit the station eventually. And so how are you actually staying aware of what's going on? And like, how are you just making sure that you're not falling behind?
So a few things. I mean, if you look at specific, like AI has been around a long time, right? I graduated from college in the 90s and AI existed then, right? It just looks different right now with the LLMs, right? And generative AI has definitely been a hype cycle or a leapfrog in innovation. And I think it's also much more quick and accessible. Like if you talk about building predictive models and machine learning models or Monte Carlo simulations, like these kinds of tools have been around a long time and they take a long time to build and a very specific expertise in general to build. And then you talk about the LLMs coming around and it essentially starts to become an API. And it's not really that simple, but it is very accessible and democratized for everyone and easy to use. So that I think has helped create this hype cycle. I do think people are a little bit overusing it, and you see like what I call magic wandification, which is like just because you put a magic wand in your UI doesn't actually mean you drove some sort of new value with AI. And I think when people get unreasonable pressure from their boards or their CEOs or their go-to-market partners to just do AI, but they don't actually have a good idea yet, that magic wandification shows up and then you just have features. It's also very early on for monetization and who's winning at monetizing AI. You're not really seeing all that much of companies who are established utilizing AI driving monetization. You're seeing AI drive new companies really quickly to come up, or companies to stay competitive and drive more value using AI. So I think that's an interesting sort of piece of the puzzle to watch. I mean, I think, just giving a company a really high valuation because they say they do AI, that's probably, as we've all seen this movie before, not going to last and not going to turn out. But I do really think ignoring it and pretending like it's just a hype cycle is probably the wrong thing, because it does really cool things. I mean, even in your day-to-day life, like I use ChatGPT to write my grandma a letter. And,
You did?
I do every week.
I hope grandma's not listening. That's terrible, Trisha. Why do you do that?
Way to put your heart into that. Way to put your heart into those letters.
Okay. She's 102 and a half.
That feels worse. This is getting worse for me.
Do you say, can you write a letter for a 102-year-old? Is that how you prompt it?
Yeah. Well, it knows her now because it's AI. And here's the thing. She likes very flowery language and she likes a lot of words, and that's not me. And so I just tell her, like, I have 2 high school boys, and I'm like, this is what they accomplished this week. Brady made the soccer state championship and Jarrett's cross country state. And I tell it and I put some pictures in there and I traveled to Zurich for work. And then it writes this really beautiful letter that she really appreciates.
Do you print that out and send it, or do you at least write it?
This is no. It's worse. I convert it to a PDF and email it to my mother, who reads it to her.
Okay. This is a thread I'm so glad we pulled. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
This is amazing. This is so tangential, but I actually have a founder friend who will once a week prompt AI to say, like, give me a letter like Abraham Lincoln would write his wife about how much I love my wife. And like, he edits like 10% of it. And I'm like, dude, this is not real life. Like, this is not like real human being. At least you're like actually putting in like some bullets and, you want to flush it out a little bit more. I can understand your use case. I think people are actually like using this thing to be like, basically not do any work though in relationships. And that's where it gets a little shitty for me.
That is pretty shitty. Nolan, I have another great example of how I've been using it. I keep dreaming that when I retire, that my husband and I are going to get one of those things like the camper van. We're going to get a camper van.
Like a Sprinter van?
Yeah, like a Sprinter van. And we're going to drive to Vermont. And so I sometimes, just to like dream what it would be like to not be on Zoom all day, I have ChatGPT make itineraries for me in my camper van.
You got to keep the dreams alive, whatever it takes. Thank God we're in Riverside here and not Zoom. Speaking of the 90s, great era, by the way. We talked about your being in your prime earlier before we started recording. Now I'm visualizing you as 102, having your sons read you PDF letters. But, we had talked, Trisha, last week about, and myself too, about being emerging female executives, in the early 2000s when it was pretty male dominated. I mean, I remember being at Intuit and Yahoo, and I'm kind of like the only female leader in the room, and usually 15 years younger at that than these male leaders. And so just wanted to talk about your journey there and your experiences, because you're a really strong leader. You work with the Todds, the Eric Trones. I mean, they're very intense. Like, how did you do that coming up in your career, and some of the wins and some of the scars?
Yeah, I was a math major in undergrad and then was a software engineer right out of college. And there definitely weren't a lot of women in that role, or even as a math major for me at NC State. So it just seemed like the way it was. And funny, early in my career, it really didn't bother me. Early in my career, I was just so driven and like so ready to outwork everyone. This is going to sound really weird. I can't believe I'm saying this.
This is why we're here. This is incredible.
It's true. I thought it was an advantage when I was young in my career. I was like, yep, I can beat all these guys and they are all going to know who I am. And I can actually remember interviewing for jobs in college. And, it would be those on-campus interviews where people would go in a group for the second round on site together. And I can remember being the only woman and being 100% sure when I walked out of there, I'd be the one to get the job. And that it really helped differentiate me. And I probably understood what actually differentiated me at that point in my life, being 21. But I definitely felt it was an advantage early in my career. And I definitely just was very confident, very, very driven, very focused, and ready to outwork everybody. And I just didn't care. And I would just go. So I just felt early in my career, it just wasn't a thing. And then you become a little more mature and a little more aware of what's actually happening around you and how much business is happening at the golf course or at places you're not invited to. And, when I was on the executive team at Encino, where we did focus on diversity, and I did have a very diverse team, I was the only woman on the C-suite at that time.
And you were there for a long time.
6 years.
Were you the only woman for 6 years on the C-suite, or the majority of that time?
Yes. I just think as I got older, it was more of an issue for me to feel the weight of supporting other women and making sure they had the right opportunities. And it's like it shouldn't be the only way you could have the kind of successful career I did, is if you're just like, willing to outwork everyone. And not everyone has that same personality I have, and not all men do either. And not all men had to do, some of the things I had to do to be successful. And so as I got older and more mature, I just really felt a little bit more of the burden of everyone else around me, and also a little less willingness to be so driven to outwork and be the one and sort of step on people even at certain times. I think I did in my early career, versus like bringing people together. And that is where it became a little bit more of my mission, and to help other women and make it more equitable.
Yeah. How much of that do you think about today as like part of your responsibility given the C-level title?
I absolutely think it's part of my responsibility, for sure, to advocate for other women and to make sure that my colleagues think about the broader perspective, and to ensure fairness in the workplace. Absolutely.
Do you think that we've made progress with our fellow male counterparts stepping up to that?
Yes, I absolutely do. I mean, part of why I did come to Pendo was because I saw a lot more women in the C-suite and on the executive team than I had seen in other places I worked. And that was attractive to me. And also because we display our diversity numbers out on the website. And so if they're public, that means you can't hide behind things, and it's something you have to talk about. And that was part of what attracted me to come to Pendo. I absolutely do think we've made progress, but not enough. I mean, we're not even close to having equality.
So, disclaimer, we didn't put this on the docket, so we can strike it. But if you feel okay with it, like, given this conversation, I'd love to get your opinion on something Nolan and I have been talking about for months now, which is this trend of companies basically laying off and cutting out DEI and B teams, right? And de-investing in these resources, and your opinion on that.
It is a complicated one, and we do not have to strike it. It is a complicated one, because when you're under immense pressure for profitable growth and to break even, it is easy to say that's a position that isn't driving a business outcome. We spent the first however much of this conversation talking about how much pressure there is to reach the numbers and to reduce spend. And it's easy to say this isn't something that drives business results. So I understand how it's happening, but I don't think it's the right thing to do. And I think you are seeing representation of women and minority groups go down in a lot of companies. You are seeing a tone change. I mean, all my friends that I talk to in tech companies feel like, the tone to women and minorities is sort of going backwards in terms of importance, or eye rolling important initiatives and important employee resource groups and getting funding for those things. So I think it's a real miss, because I believe that diversity is the right thing to do, but I also believe that it drives business results and will be more innovative and successful if not everybody looks the same. And so I think it's a mistake.
Yeah. It's a really interesting take, Trisha, because I think what we've seen with the last version of the DEI movement has made a lot of people feel like more divided than like more like included. And I think this is where the difference of opinions and how we interact with people. What do you think like the future of this thing looks like? Like, what do you think like the right resources are for a company? Because Kelly and I have been searching for these answers. I don't know if, you have any ideas that you've been thinking of.
I don't. I hope, I guess what I've been thinking about and hoping is that, my kids who are in high school, by the time they are the ones running companies, they'll just have been raised different.
Exactly.
That's my hope. Like, I think everything we're doing right now in reality is a crutch because of the lack of education and the lack of exposure and the lack of awareness that those of us who are running companies today have. And having a D&I initiative or leader or resource groups are things to help sort of fix that. but you only we can fix things. And so I guess that is my hope. And I don't know if it's realistic or not.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you. I feel like it has to start early in life. Otherwise, it's just like you get to the company level and these things are ingrained in people. And how can you possibly solve them at work every day?
Well, that's why, right? These teams exist, right? I mean, we try to shift people's behaviors and their mindsets in these companies they work in. Where do their behaviors and mindsets come from? We all have stuff. And, my parents used to be like, what are you doing for your job? You're trying to change people's behavior. Why don't you just go open up a restaurant? Like, what is this? So that's what we're trying to do, is retrain how people were like raised. And so I love that angle, Trisha, that we're doing that now with these kids, right? I have 2 boys too. Like, figure it out.
I mean, our boys, poor kids, have to be raised by this crazy woman. So
don't talk about me like that.
They'll learn.
They'll learn.
They'll learn. Yes. So just to transition to the last few minutes, I'd love to do some real talk around HR, right? Clearly, we have to.
My favorite.
Your favorite. I'd love just to kick off this chat between us 3 with maybe how things have changed for you, right? You've been working in tech a long time, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, how has your perception of this function shifted from then to now? What did you expect then? What do you expect now? How's that evolution taken place? Sure, it was a fun one.
Well, I love that you called it a function, because there are certain departments at a company that I call the functions. I actually learned that from my last boss at Encino. And I also fondly call them the Department of No. And I'm not going to name these specific departments unless you push me, and I will then. But the Department of No, those are the people who have a very important job of actually making the business not move forward.
Are you describing legal?
Security, legal, accounting, and I'm being a little sarcastic because obviously those things are important to keep us safe, but they are the Department of No, and they do like to slow things down. And I think for me, on my tech journey, it's thinking about our people teams from an HR department, which is part of the functions or the Department of No, to a people team, which is becoming a strategic partner to Yes, and understanding the outcomes and what you're trying to achieve, and take your really smart, great people and help you learn how to make them work together to achieve your goals. And when you can get that kind of a relationship, it is special. And I have had that at Pendo for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're describing yes and.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really great way to frame it, which is, yeah, Trisha, I hear what you're saying. And I think if we tried it this way, it would actually be more effective. That is it, I think, in its best version. To take the other side. So like Kelly, you and I talked about Shamath Palihapitiya, who is now running a new company and is saying like no HR. And in fact, no HR, and HR is actually run by the functional executive. The more I've thought on this one, Kelly, the more I can understand like why somebody feels that way, because of exactly what Trisha led in with, which is like, it is the Department of No at many companies. And then the other thing is, which Trisha didn't say, is a lot of leaders will basically just throw shit over the fence and make it HR's problem when it's actually like their problem to go and solve. So Trisha, what's your take on this like pushback / revulsion of HR?
Well, I can understand it, because if you're only experiencing sort of a more traditional HR Department of No policies and procedures, these are all the things you can't do. These are all the rules. Hey, this person isn't working out in my team. Help me figure out how to up level this person or find somebody better in the market. And they just pass like, the cover template report, the TPS report for you to fill out. If that's where you're coming from, then I can understand this need to say, like, I'm trying to run a business. I'm a leader. I understand my people. I can run my business. I don't need the Department of No and the TPS report template. But I think if you have the good fortune of ever working with a people team that is actually business partners and that can be that like sort of magic 8-ball lens for you. I can't spend every moment thinking about how everyone's going to react to this communication that's coming in. But my people team often can and does, right? Or if I'm having a conflict between two of my employees, sometimes it's better solved without me in the room. And I'm not shirking responsibilities. I'll get in the room, but sometimes it's more effective to have an independent person just work with people. And I mean, Kelly has this magic of bringing laughter and like just sort of bringing approachability and real talk to the conversation that sometimes as the boss, you just can't do. So I think if you are fortunate to have a real partner team, you wouldn't want that model.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about the Chamath comment, right, Nolan? I think it was like 8 months ago. And I'd love to have him on here, but now he's like, all famous in the All In podcast and who knows, but
he's been famous for a while, to be fair.
Whatever. So the point though is I understand why he said that as well. But my disagreement is you're not getting rid of HR. You're just having someone else do the work because the work doesn't go away. So it's a matter of not trusting the people in those seats or wanting them to be in those seats, which is what we're kind of talking about. And the last question I have, Trisha, because I love unpacking executives' mindsets around this, is I think the audience can learn so much. What does it look like and feel like when you're working with a great HR leader? Like describe, not like the adjectives, they're this, they're that, but like, what does the week look like? How do you interact with them? How often? What do they do? Day in and day out, little things, big things. Like, how does that actually look if you were to like describe it so someone else could implement it?
If you have a real relationship with your people team, and whether that's your business partner or whether that's the chief people officer, then a lot of the conversations are not what's on your calendar. It's all the things you're like going for a walk in the morning, or I'm driving to Raleigh to the office, and the phone call, the ad hoc, I'm thinking about this. Can you help me think it through? Hey, can you just listen to me brainstorm for a minute and challenge the way I'm thinking? I think a lot, like that's where the magic happens in the relationship. I think the on calendar stuff is more of the, functiony department work that has to happen. We've got to look at the review cycle. We've got to look at the 9 box. We got to do succession planning. And I'm saying those things funny. I realize those are important and these are people's careers and they need raises. And I'm not diminishing the importance of that, but the ad hoc conversation of like, how do I take my team from a B to an A or an A to an A plus? And those come not from calendars.
I love that. It's the stuff off the calendar. Such an easy way to delineate.
Or I'm struggling with Todd doing this thing and it's making me mad. Talk me off the ledge today. Or how am I going to call him and approach it? Let me practice it with you before I do it with him so that we have a productive conversation. Like that's a simple thing, but that's.
Yeah. And now, of course, I'm visualizing a meeting on my calendar with the subject line, I'm struggling with Todd.
It's happened.
Trisha, this has been awesome. I think it's really helpful for our audience to get a perspective from somebody like you, who's like, as chief product officer, and your relationship for like how you work with people like me and Kelly. So thanks for sharing your insights. We're super grateful for it.
So good to have you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.